Today is really an exciting day for the Commonwealth of Virginia. I talk a lot about what we need to do to grow and diversify our economy. I talk a lot about the new Virginia economy. And what we are going to announce today is a game changer for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Some of you have already seen the early announcement. I know these folks were up early with the investors in Wall Street telling them this major announcement that has happened here today in Virginia. The announcement that Dominion, AGL Resources, Duke Energy, and Piedmont Natural Resources are forming a joint venture to build a major natural gas pipeline and energy, what I call an energy superhighway. It will go through Virginia, West Virginia, and North Carolina.
I'm a seventh generation to own this particular property here. Now that goes back to, let's see, forefather, names appear below, born in England, moved to America in 1739. He settled in Fredericksburg, where he remained until 1768, when he moved to Amherst, in parentheses, now Nelson County, and lived to a ripe old age, dying in the year 1789. He was buried on his own farm near Livingston, countryside of Nelson. Dear property owner, I am writing on behalf of Dominion Transmission and Company, Dominion in parentheses, to tell you about a new natural gas pipeline that Dominion is researching as a possibility for your area. We are referring to this pipeline as the Southeast Reliability Project. The purpose of the pipeline is to increase the availability of natural gas supplies in part of the Southeast, including Virginia, thereby helping promote stable energy prices and economic development. They were coming from over here until the Marcy Bill, they found out she had a conservation easement on her property right on top of the mountain. So now instead of going through the gap from running up on her, they're coming down all through here and go through those hay bales right there and go to Ridgely's land and then still go back up on the mountain.
But they're still going through you.
No, they're still going through it. We don't know where they're going through yet.
Had told me they intend to come and survey our place. So I keep it locked because I don't know if they're just going to barge in here, and I have animals loose and I have guard dogs, and don't want them just to come barging in. So there's one marker here, which is this edge of it. The other marker is right at the end of that bend down there. You can see a posted sign on a tree on the right. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's right, the other marker is across there. So that's the area that they want to go. I've been here since '89, and then kind of had an idea on the dairy farm and raising the sheep, and I've worked on the land and getting the land ready for pasture and to nourish the dairy goats up there in the top, and had to run water systems. Down here is a spring that waters in this front field, but it's, if they come through here, that's too close to my spring. John Ed dug out on the other side of the road here I think I measured it was 45 or 50 feet across the road and down, and my spring came down. He only dug it 3 feet deep. So if they're digging something 9 feet deep, you know, it can disturb that water for this front of the property. And then I've put in water systems to water my different fields up at the top, and you know, different areas for kidding and milking and grazing and sick bay and all of those things that you have to have on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, what would they think that I'm going to do while they're doing this work, which I wouldn't let them do anyway because they're too close to my house, and I don't want it on my property.
We came here 15 years ago, and with nothing, basically. We were living on someone else's farm, and then we found like 10 acres here that we scraped our money together and we bought it, and there was no electricity, no running water, nothing. So we basically camped here for the first 6 months without electricity and running water. Then we got power, and we moved into a 30-foot trailer and started building our house, and basically everything here we've built. There was nothing here. So my husband always wanted to build his own house. So finally, you know, this was like around the year 2000, he finally got his chance to do it. And now this pipeline's coming through, and if it comes, you know, across our property, it would be about 400 feet from the house, which really is not too good. So that's Luna. She's my Arab that I did endurance riding, and Gandhi is a Connemara pony who was also like a rescue about 8 years ago. So he ended up with us. It's kind of overwhelming, you know. I mean, things get neglected, you know, because you're so taken up by trying to organize against them. The onions aren't planted, the garden isn't weeded, the house isn't cleaned, the husband's neglected, all kinds of stuff.
That should be first priority.
Yes.
Well, we received a couple certified letters in the mail telling us that that the Dominion Power was intending to put a pipeline through our property. The product that they're moving here is fracked gas, at least a lot of it is, and from the best I can tell, fracked gas is a process that puts a lot of poisons in the ground and has not been evaluated appropriately as far as I can tell. You see on the news very frequently stories where people's faucets are spewing discolored product, gas coming out and other things like that, water wells being contaminated, and the materials in them, a lot of them are carcinogens, and yet in the rush to develop an independent marketplace, a market for a huge amount of this gas. We don't care that we're poisoning the water for our nation, and we're going to pay for it.
We had 1/10 of an acre in Charlottesville, and every single square inch of it was covered with food gardens and wildlife gardens, and we had chickens and bees, and it just became clear that we needed more room. So we decided to move to Nelson so that we would be able to really do what we wanted with gardening, and the boys would be able to just go outside on their own, because we highly value unstructured outdoor play. playing. And my boys love the outdoors. To us, this was a perfect property because of its wildlife potential, because we love to bird and we love wildlife. When we've been so excited we wanted to have our own property to take care of. We found out that we were on the route of the pipeline. At first, we weren't totally horrified. I thought to myself, well, you know, in Charlottesville, there were pipelines all over the place. I knew that our home in Charlottesville had a gas pipeline going right into it. But the difference, but over time, I learned more about this pipeline. I learned that it was going to be 42 inches wide, which is much, much, much bigger than most of the pipelines out there. Today, the pipeline companies are pushing much bigger, much higher pressure than other pipelines. So in Charlottesville, when I had a pipeline going into my house, of course, it was also not a transmission pipeline like the Atlantic Coast Pipeline is. It's a transmission pipeline, which are always bigger. But in the past, even transmission pipelines would be between 20 and 36 inches, and a maximum PSI of around 700 would be considered high pressure. Today, they're building them or proposing to build them, trying to build them at 42 inches, and maximum pressures as high as 2,000 PSI, although the ACP, they only want, they're saying the maximum pressure will be 1440. But the bigger the diameter of the pipeline and the higher the pressure, the more dangerous the pipeline is. And they come with these, you know, trucks and things with big blades, and they go and get rid of all the trees. It's just devastating destruction. For us, we feel like it devalues the property so much from a scenic potential, from the wildlife perspective, from our enjoyment of the property because of our fear and dread. If the pipeline doesn't go through on my property, it will be going through on one of my neighbor's properties. And it will affect, of course, the construction and the sedimentation is a huge factor in water pollution. So that's very concerning also.
I was a resident of Nelson County for 20 years, starting back in the late 70s. I own property in Nelson County. And for the last 20 years, I've also been involved in forest protection through Wild Virginia, a local organization that I'm a conservation director and chair of, and who works on conservation issues protecting the George Washington Jefferson National Forest. So we're looking at our laptops and looking at email messages and such, and one comes across that says, well, Duke Energy has just requested a request for proposals from pipeline companies in Virginia for this, to get natural gas from the fracking fields in West Virginia and Ohio through Virginia to North Carolina and to the coast. And it goes right through Virginia, it goes right through the National Forest. And I picked up my mail, and there's a letter from Dominion, and the letter from Dominion is, you know, says we requesting to survey across your property in Nelson County. So all of a sudden I have these two things going on simultaneously that I would be involved in, the same project, but not just the effects through the National Forest for the organization that I'm the chair of, but for my own interest going through Nelson County. And then when other folks in Nelson County started getting letters as well, there was the effort to start doing something about it. Emails were exchanged, and because I had some information ahead of time about this, thanks to my past work and my current work, I was able to, you know, kind of be one of the main people providing information about what the process was, what we could do, and things like that. And so it was a natural thing for me to do, to be involved in the formation of Friends of Nelson, as well as the opposition to the pipeline, both in Nelson County, but also where it crossed through the National Forest, and for that matter, the entire pipeline altogether. There was very, very little information, and it was up to individuals like ourselves to gather it from wherever we possibly could to put that information together. And we find even today that that information trumps the information from Dominion, because we know it's not in Dominion's best interest to be open and transparent in terms of what they're doing, because it would jeopardize their ability to make the pipeline happen. It would cut across their bottom line. It would increase the cost of their return on their investments. And that's how Dominion makes its decisions. It makes its decisions by the level of its investors and by what the return on the investment to those investors is going to be. And that is a very different criterion than what we are using in terms of what the impacts are to our community, temporary, long-lived, permanent impacts. And none of the information from Dominion includes any of those impacts at all.
Nelson County is largely a tourist-based county. People come here because it's beautiful. They come here because we have some unique tourist opportunities, a lot of wineries and cideries and distilleries. When you're less beautiful, when you've got more infrastructure, you know, these big gouges that they're going to have to cut through the mountainside to be able to run this pipeline, not to mention the construction, but after it's built and stabilized and grown over, it's still not going to be pretty. It's going to look like a strange swath that goes up and through the mountain. So it's hard to put a number on it. You can't say, well, we'll have 10% less tourism, but the less attractive we are, obviously, it's going to have some impact. It may be a little bit harder to quantify. The other areas where I'm concerned is when the idea is that they're going to be taking frack gas from West Virginia, possibly even areas of Virginia at some point in the future, and transporting that through this pipeline. That's not a long-term process. I think the USGS has estimated there's about 15 or 16 years worth of available frack gas, you know, if it's heavily extracted in that area. And I've gotten to the point where I have shoes in my closet that are 15 or 16 years old. So 15 or 16 years to me is nothing. It is not like it's not like it's even a generation. It's nothing. It's a short-term fix to a problem that I don't see Dominion or the state of Virginia or these other people that should be looking towards a long-term viable solution. What are we going, assuming we want our kids to actually have any kind of life, or, maybe even grandkids, what are they going to have for energy? And the approach seems to be, we'll make our profits now. We'll meet our profit projections now as a corporation. We'll figure that out later. There's a lot of smart people and they'll figure all that out later. I'm an engineer. I'm supposed to be one of the smart people. I know too many engineers to think that we got this great idea that we're saving for later. Later may be really, really painful. And the more we extract, fossil fuels out now so that we can have cheap energy now, the higher the price that we're going to pay down the road. So what I see is 15 years from after they build this, they've extracted their gas out to the point where it's still there, but it's no longer profitable. They said, we don't need this pipeline anymore. The ugliness they leave behind, the environmental devastation they leave behind, it's there forever. Another issue that I see that's more on a kind of a gut property rights issue is you've got this private entity that's trying to make a significant amount of money, very little, if any, real benefit, tangible benefit for the state, but they're going to come in on people's property. Unfortunately, our property is not impacted, but this is a close community. We know people personally whose property is being impacted, and they're coming in and saying, well, we're going to run this through your farm or through your, whatever your land is. A lot of it is agricultural land because it's considered a low value land. And by the way, after we run it through your farm, you can never plant anything on that. You have to keep it cleared forever. You're limiting the activity. So yeah, maybe you can run a small compact tractor on that, but if you want to, grow corn and have a large harvester come in, you have to get our permission to cross the pipeline path with your equipment. That just seems somehow wrong to me, to say it's this person's land, they're farming, they're not doing anything different, they're not making a huge benefit, they're getting paid a pittance for the value of this land when the pipeline comes through, but you're having a significant impact on what they can and cannot do on that property. So there's multiple reasons why, to me, this pipeline just doesn't make sense, not only just for Nelson County, but really for the state of Virginia.
Since we heard that Dominion had proposed to build a pipeline through this area, many of us felt that people needed to be educated about really what was going to happen. We decided to have an information table at the farmers market here every Saturday morning so that people who came to the farmers market could pick up maps of the proposed route, pick up addresses of legislators to write to, of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, anybody we could think of who had any influence on whether the route might or might not go through. We've been encouraging people to write letters to them. Okay, this is the U.S. Forest Service, the National Park Service, because it's going to be crossing the Blue Ridge Parkway if it comes. These are writing ideas of all the subjects just to get people started: property rights, property values, tourism, environment, energy, economics. And suggesting to use existing pipeline right-of-ways instead of putting a new one through here. And a real important one is writing to FERC, because once the energy companies apply to FERC for what is technically called the pre-application process, FERC just does not deny permits to people. They're in the business of granting permits. So we want to get people agitated and educated and write to FERC and tell them why in particular they do not want the pipeline coming through the area before the energy companies even start any of the processes, so that FERC knows that we really have a problem here.
The Appalachians, the Blue Ridge Mountains, I mean, they're precious. They're precious. So we have, of course, on the East Coast, a giant, what do you want to call it, a megalopolis, you know, of our cities and stuff. And here in this region is where we still have some large tracts of land. And I think it's important to preserve them. And people who are thinking, oh, well, it's just 75-foot permanent right-of-way. Well, guess what? They put one big pipeline down, it serves as a magnet for others. That's how it works. It becomes an energy corridor. And furthermore, I'm very concerned about the pipeline is infrastructure, and it's infrastructure for fracking. So they put this pipeline through George Washington National Forest. They're spending $5 billion on this pipeline. Then it makes it so much politically easier to start to frack in George Washington National Forest. Then they say, oh, well, look, we already built the pipeline. The infrastructure's there. You know, it just makes sense. And I think it's actually completely, it's just logical that the pipeline is step one.
The National Forest in Virginia is commons. It belongs to all of us. The impacts that happen to that National Forest happen to a piece of land that isn't available anywhere else in the world, that has values that don't exist anywhere else. And the impacts to that would be permanent and long-lasting. The fragmentation as it crossed right through the National Forest, irrefutable impacts that can't ever be rectified.
For me, the most important thing is to hand over what we've been gifted for the next 7 generations and make sure that they have clean water and clean air and a healthy planet to live on. And I don't feel like that the Dominion Pipeline is going to bring that and honor that sacredness.
That's my grandfather. That was his wife. This is an uncle of mine. This is my brother, and this is my mother and father. And up here is Samuel Oscar Brunt. That was a person that was raised on this property up here all his life. But we don't know whether they come in between you and I. You can't tell from that map that he gave.
Do they know there's a cemetery here?
Well, they didn't really care. We told 2 or 3 of them. And you didn't get to see this. You talked to one, and 2 weeks later you talked to somebody else. They were gone, and nobody could really give you any kind of an answer. I'd call them a bunch of SOBs. I think they're doing it for the company's own good, not giving a damn about what's going to happen in Virginia. Just cooperation is going to reap the profits from it.
It's so clearly the wrong thing in the wrong place at the wrong time for so many reasons. The only reason that this pipeline has any justification at all is that it can and that it provides profits. There is no other justifiable reason for the existence of this pipeline at all.
Everyone talks about Dominion as if it's this thing, but Dominion is actually people. And I, really was told not to hate people, but I really don't appreciate the person who came up with the first idea of like, hey, maybe we should run this pipeline through there. And then the other people who agree and say, yes, that's a good idea. And then the people above them that say, yes, let's do it, I mean, these people, I don't think they realize how much it's screwing people's lives up and affecting people's lives. I mean, if they really cared about people and communities and the environment, they would be investing in renewable energy and not racing to get all the gas out of the ground and out of the country. It's just, these people, I don't know if they have a conscience or if they have a heart. They really don't care. They pretend like they care, but they don't. And so I kind of am seeing Dominion now as more personal faces. They're people. It's not a machine. There's people behind it who have families, who have houses, who have lives, and I don't think they would like it if their lives were disrupted by this. So somehow I want to get that across to them, that how much they're affecting people, messing with people's lives and everything.